Hello, my name is Higuera. I'm an independent researcher, and my presentation is titled Pro Wrestling's Lieux de Mémoire, Arenas, Halls of Fame, and Cultural Memory. Today I'm talking about professional wrestling, not just as entertainment, but as a powerful site of cultural memory. My argument is that wrestling venues, halls of fame, and commemorative practices can be understood through Pierre Nora's concept of lieux de mémoire, or sites of memory. In this framework, places and institutions become important not simply because they preserve the past, but because they condense, organize, and symbolize memory for a community. Pro wrestling offers a striking example of this process because it is a form of popular culture built around performance, nostalgia, and fan identity. First off, who's Pierre Nora and what is his concept of lieu de mémoire? Pierre Nora was a French historian, part of the third generation of the Annales school, and developed the concept of lieu de mémoire in the 1980s and 1990s as a part of a major project on French national memory. His central claim was that modern societies no longer possess the kind of living, organic memory that once passed naturally from one generation to another. Instead, memory has become dependent on external supports like monuments, museums, archives, anniversaries, rituals, and commemorative sites. In Nora's words, lieu de mémoire emerge when real memory disappears and history steps in to preserve what would otherwise be forgotten. These sites can be material, like buildings and monuments, functional, like ceremonies and rituals, or symbolic, like names, images, and institutions. The key point is that they become charged with meaning because people invest them with memory. They are not memory itself, but places where memory is crystallized, staged, and made visible. Pro wrestling is a particularly good case study because it's performance art that is built on repetition, nostalgia, and historical reference. Every major match refers to earlier matches, earlier rivalries, earlier stars, and earlier venues. Pro wrestling, therefore, produces its own memory culture. Fans do not only remember what happened in the ring, they remember where it happened and who was there, what the crowd sounded like, and how the event fits into a larger story. That makes it a kind of living archive. It is not only entertainment, it is a system for producing and sustaining memory. One of the clearest examples is Philadelphia's ECW Arena, now known as the 2300 Arena. For fans of Extreme Championship Wrestling, this is more than just a building. It is a place associated with a particular style, a particular era, and a particular fan community. The arena became famous in the 1990s as the home of ECW's gritty, intense, boundary pushing product. It is remembered as a site of innovation, rebellion, and intimacy, where the small size of the venue intensified the relationship between performers and audience. In Nora's terms, the ECW arena functions as a lieu de mémoire because it has become a symbolic location where the memory of ECW is concentrated and continually revived. Even after ECW ended, the arena remained meaningful because the building carries the residue of the promotion's identity. It is a place where memory sticks. Other wrestling venues work in similar ways. Madison Square Garden, for instance, is not just a famous arena. In wrestling history, it is one of the most important symbolic spaces in the United States. It has hosted major shows for generations and is tied to ideas of legitimacy, prestige, and tradition. For many fans, appearing at Madison Square Garden marks a wrestler's arrival on the biggest stage. Madison Square Garden was a key venue for the World Wrestling Federation, hosting numerous live wrestling events and television specials from 1976 until 1997. The venue is considered a home arena for WWE, with many historic matches and title changes taking place there. That is exactly a sort of cultural meaning Nora's had in mind, a site that becomes larger than its physical function because it gathers together layers of memory, ritual, and identity. The same logic applies to halls of fame, as another kind of memory site, but they work differently from arenas. They do not simply preserve the past, they curate it. They decide who belongs, what matters, and how the story should be told. It turns performance into heritage and selects certain figures for lasting recognition. In that sense, they shape memory rather than just store it. In pro wrestling, this is especially important because the history of the industry is fragmented across different regions, promotions, and eras. A Hall of Fame helps organize the history into a story, so any Hall of Fame also becomes an argument about legacy. This brings me to a Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum, which was a physical institution dedicated to preserving wrestling history. It gave pro wrestling history a physical and educational form. It gathered memorabilia, photographs, belts, costume, and other objects into a public display that taught visitors how the industry understands itself. In Nora's framework, it is a classic example of a memory site because it turns ephemeral performance into archive heritage. Pro wrestling is a performance which often disappears the moment the bell rings, but the museum says that its history can be preserved and categorized. This is exactly a kind of function Nora had in mind. The WWE Hall of Fame is especially interesting because it is not a physical building. It exists through ceremonies, televised induction segments, video packages, and streaming content. That makes it a modern, media-based lieu de mémoire. It's paralyzed not in a location you can visit year-round, but a recurring media event that produces memory through performance. In that sense, the WWE Hall of Fame shows how memory in the digital age is staged through spectacle and broadcast, rather than through a permanent building. It is a memory site made of media. This matters for cultural history because it shows how pro wrestling produces historical meaning and broadens our understanding of where memory lives. Its venues, museums, and ceremonial institutions are not just background spaces, they are part of how fans and companies make sense of the past, of how pro wrestling remembers itself. They tell us what is worth remembering, what gets preserved, what gets celebrated, what counts as legacy, how fans and institutions imagine the past, and how identity is maintained across generations. Pro wrestling is a useful case study because it sits at the intersection of spectacle, commerce, phantom, and ritual. It demonstrates that memory is not limited to monuments or museums, but also in arenas, ceremonies, and fan communities, places that may seem popular, commercial, or even disposable at first glance. That makes pro wrestling a valuable case study for cultural history. So, in summary, Pierre Nora's concept Lieu de Mémoire helps us see pro wrestling as a world of memory sites rather than just performances. They are historical actors in their own right. The ECW Arena, Madison Square Garden, the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and the WWE Hall of Fame all show how memory is embedded in places, media, and rituals. They are sites where the past is not simply preserved, but actively performed. In conclusion, pro wrestling offers a compelling and unexpected way to rethink cultural memory. Through Nora's concept of lieu de mémoire, we can see wrestling venues and halls of fame as more than just fan landmarks. They are places where history is organized, emotion is condensed, and collective identity is made visible. Pro wrestling is not outside history. It actively produces history, and that is why it deserves a serious place in cultural history. Thank you.